Christian, if you want to introduce yourself and talk about how you got into the space, that'd be fantastic.
Hi, Tyler. Thank you, and hi, James. Thank you very much for having me on this show. I ended up in this space after a number of experiences that I had. Basically, my background is half engineer, half management. Basically, what I do, I apply management principles and technology know-how to improve the way people work within companies, but at a larger scale. Like 15 years ago, I had an experience working for a large company where the project of mine went really smooth. And then I went back and look, what's the pattern that I used unconsciously? And it was not like I used maybe some people came to me, Christy, put this one here, Christy, do this there. And then I had the chance to trial those things over time. And I discovered some good patterns and some bad patterns in the way people work together. So it's been a long period of discovery and research and working with my team, with all my friends and all our friendly customers to find the pattern that works better, that is truly employee centric and not HQ centric.
Cool. And good to be here with you, Christian and Tyler. Yeah, I'm James Davies. I'm the CEO of Kinetic Data. Man, how I got into this space, I kind of fell into the space, to be honest. One of my first jobs after college was working for a consulting company, a systems integrators, they call them here in the States, that was doing some work for the government. And I got assigned to a team that worked on it within the IT service management space. So ITSM space, it's like the help desk ticketing system. And that company actually purchased Kinetic. And I was the guy that got assigned to do the implementation of it. And it was really fun because, well, it was a new technology and I'm kind of a technologist at heart. But what ultimately happened is we saw some kind of patterns unfold. And those patterns were really that, large organizations, they've got lots of different systems and users have to kind of start a process in system A. Maybe that output of that is an ID or a ticket number that you got to then feed into system B and then re-enter a bunch of stuff. And there's just this disjointed experience. And I kind of fell in love with the idea of like, how do we stitch this together or glue this together? And what are the options? And so my career's kind of evolved. I wound up joining Kinetic Data, working on those types of projects for a number of years and then leading our engineering team. And then today running the company. And it's been just a fun space. There's a lot of energy and excitement about improving experience, especially within corporations. And it's great to see that that's starting to be highlighted within the environment. So excited to be here and chat with you guys about that.
Love it. One of the first questions, James, you kind of alluded to it, is we've got so many systems, and Christian, you had talked about like the experience that you have with moving to system A to system B to system C when you've got so many different systems. You need to make them all fit together and glue together. What's the solve? How do you actually pull that together in a meaningful way? Christian, do you have any thoughts, ideas there?
Well, actually, I do have a thought. The ways that very often people look at those systems, and those people who are looking at those systems are very much HQ people, and they love those systems. The problem is when you step into the employee shoes, you see a very different perspectives. The way to go ahead in the year 2026 and maybe into the future is just to stop thinking for a second about technology and put yourself into the employee shoes and see, well, every interaction that an employee has, there is somebody who is responsible for this topic. There is somebody who owns that, is the final owner of that um, output. And people work within operational teams. Very easy. So, and the driver, the person with the most impact here, it's the operational manager, my direct operational manager. People work in projects, and then you have to think, well, those project managers, they haven't input into this area. And actually, I don't want, if I have multiple projects, I want to have a consistent experience working with the technology across those projects. You don't want in one project to send emails with everything, and the other one to use Slack or Teams, or have something really structured across a content manager. When you third scenario is with internal business service providers, like when you request the expense reimbursement, when you request time off, when you do maybe a ticket, you want to have a consistent experience. And consistent experience, it's not just about how the transactional applications look like. This is also important, but also the way you approach changes, the information, the educational resources, how you get support, and so on. The fourth experience that you have is with the entire company. That's with this responsibility sits with the leadership of the company. How do I interact with how the employee is interacting with the leadership? And leadership, it's like forward thinking. My direct manager, my director, my VP, my CEO, and so on. How do I get the input from those people simply get the best out of me for
Right.
myself and for the company? And there is something that it's a real life example you can compare it with. And this is a shopping mall. When you go to a shopping mall, you have four different, you have several experiences. Maybe they're not four, maybe it might be a little bit more. But I have the hypermarket experience, and then I have like the smaller retail stores experience, and then I have um, entertainment and food and so on. So there are several experiences. They are not so different, but everything in the mall is centered around the visiting. The visitor.
Mhm.
Just a second. Okay, so yeah, so everything is centered around the visitor. The same should happen within the digital workplace. We need to find the maximum use of those technologies, but more than important is to have all those four drivers to have the right mindset. And this is very much like servant. I'm not here. I'm the boss of this. So many employees, so they have to listen. No, I serve those employees because if they don't work accordingly, if they go to a competitor and I lose time, I use money, lose companies resources. The same when I'm
Right.
a project manager. The same when I'm an internal service provider. The same when the internal business service provider. The same with leadership. They have to serve them. You have to make it really, really, really employee centric. Everybody says about it, but they don't quite get it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's all about taking a persona based approach, or like putting yourself in the shoes of the person actually getting the work done or talking with them. Like, what would make you happiest and most satisfied in your role? What'll make it so you actually want to follow the process and do the process? And if you start there, then I think you have a lot more chance for success. What I've seen over and over again is the business has a problem and they're not allowed to go purchase their own stuff. So they talk to IT, and IT says, "Oh, you're going to use this system, and this system works this way," and you're kind of forcing it. And I think if you work the other way around and really allow the technology to help the people that they're closest to the problem to solve the problem themselves, but with guardrails. So consistency in user experience, consistency in integrations, consistency in security, et cetera. I think you get a much better outcome. I've just seen so many times these multi-million-dollar big, either ERP or CRM or et cetera implementations fail because they didn't think about the user experience, the actual end user experience until last. And I think we really need to shift to start with that. And to me, moving into 2026 and beyond, that's really the shift. And especially with the, AI becoming such a prevalent thing and it's not going anywhere. I'm seeing vendors pop up left and right. Every week there's new vendors that are popping up and they've got some really cool technology that AI helped them to create. And that's going to work its way into organizations and compound this problem. So if you can get ahead of, hey, how can we adopt these systems with a end user first experience and consistency along that, and we can solve that problem, we'll have a lot easier time bringing those new tools in.
Actually, this experience is essential. I had an example where the company I worked for bought a very smart system. The problem was that their user interface was crappy. And everybody was thinking, well, we're going to get a good user experience from the users, and it was actually terrible. They had to go through complex menus and do complex things that should have been very simple, and it was a real problem. So this is where you need an additional layer that exposes those services to the employee in a friendlier manner, because this is where the main problem was. The second problem that I see is that when you implement a platform, you have a challenge actually efficiently interacting with your user base. If you have a small user base, it's no problem. You just chat,
Right.
or we have a meeting like we have now. But if you have a large user base, then it's very expensive to interact with them. So this is why you want to have a very clean and clear communication channel. And the problem is that very people realize when you sit into the employee shoes, there are a large number of other people from HQ willing to speak to the same employee at the same time, and everyone thinking, well, my piece of information is more important, please remember it. But they don't. They're regular people. It's not like you and me very committed to the kind of work that we do. Probably most of the people listening to this video, they're very passionate about what they do. The average Joe, he's just looking to get their paycheck, to get to holiday. They want to go out with friends and so on. This is their main concern, and there is nothing wrong with that. You
Right.
cannot change this. You have to go to a level to reduce the complexity and make your company accessible to them, not the other way around.
Right. Yeah. If they fight it, but then frankly, you can buy all these systems and they can be expensive and whatnot. But if users don't actually use them and you don't get adoption, then what's the point? Like I've seen so many times, just like you mentioned at your previous job, they bought some expensive HR system, but the interface was so bad. So I bet people were just picking up the phone and calling HR or sending an email to HR. They didn't actually use the system because it was so terrible. So what was the point to begin with of this investment? So we're in the software business, so we're constantly thinking about the return on investment. And so I completely agree that kind of having a layer, frankly, a layer that the organization owns and can look and feel and breathe the culture of the organization, and then plugging in behind the scenes these best of breed HR tools or sales tools or whatever they are, that gives you the ability to tailor the user experience to your business process as a company without customizing these underlying systems. And when you have the ability to do that, you can actually change these underlying systems without retraining the entire user population, which is exactly what you were talking about earlier. If you got a large user population, to get everyone on the same page or to communicate a message when something does change, it's extremely expensive. Well, if the end user doesn't even know something changed, that's even better, because they really don't care that you got a new HR system. They just want to know that they can, request time off or whatever they've got to do.
Actually, this is a big problem. Like everybody at the headquarters think, well, I have this system. They invested a lot of money. But for example, if you start thinking, there are some names of the technologies like SAP HR system is called SuccessFactors. If you put yourself in the shoes of the employee, this doesn't mean anything. If you're an HR manager, it's fine. If you're an IT manager, it's fine. You know how to find it. But if you're a regular employee, you want to do your timesheet or training or whatever performance, well, success factors, maybe not this one. Let's look down and take the next one, which might be called Power Apps. Because I have a friend who showed me, well, those are our Power Apps here. But do people need to know the technology behind it or not? Because or if it's called work labs, oh well, okay, but it's work labs, what area of functionalities do they cover? You see, it's when you start putting yourself in the employee shoes, it's very much like they're from a different planet. They speak a different language, and you have to unscrew everything within your head, because I was very much like a headquarter person until I realized, well, something is off. When you put yourself in the shoes of the employee, number of best practices that you see across multiple industries, they don't quite work when you consider that I forget training 90% of what I learn within a training, it's gone in 90 days. If I read something, probably chances are within 2 days I forgot about it. If you send me an email, the 30% of those emails would not be open. Maybe I read the subject line, but not more. We just have to understand the audience, and we have to speak their language and build. Actually, we have to rebuild somehow the company around those front.
Yeah, I love it.
Cristian, I'm curious to know, like, what are some of your tactics? Like, how do you dive in and start thinking like an employee, thinking like an end user, going from that HQ mindset down to, all right, now I need to find out how would an experience work well for this organization, for employees at this organization? Do you have any ways that you dive into that?
The way I do it, I really like, it took me a while because I was trying to generalize the model that I was having at the company. I had a project when I told you, well, it worked rather well for me. And I was trying to generalize. And actually, the shopping mall is a very good example. Because when you go to a shopping mall, basically you have a to-do list there. Maybe you want to go to a movie, but you want to have a hamburger and you want to buy some shoes or maybe get a haircut, okay? But the person next to you has a different list of things, and each goes to their own destination. But when you start thinking how those people built the experience around you, we don't have to invent anything. There is somebody who thought about it. Shopping malls maybe they're around for 100 years, and regular shops, they have been around for thousands of years. And you start looking at how do those guys communicate with their visitors or passersby. And when you look at the shop, you see, well, those people, they try to attract me with their values, their branding, with their front windows, whatever the name is. When I go to the store, they display what's new.
They don't order they don't put clothing on the racks in order of the SKU number in their inventory management system, which is, I mean, frankly, kind of how companies roll out their services to their employees, and employees don't think like that.
Yeah, actually, this is a very, very good analogy. So if you just look at email, because I have a few friends in IC, and they tend to think, well, let's send them an email. In your house, you don't have things sorted in order of the date when they were bought.
Right.
Now, you have the cutlery, you have clothes, you have a certain way to organize those things. And you just have to find a way to organize the way to build it. It's around types of services. The operational management services, project management services, internal business services, and leadership services. Basically, everything that I will do in relationship with those services. And then you go down from there. You just need like an abstraction layer that makes that makes this experience that is less dependent on the name of the app, the technology that is being used. I'm not interested in the entire HR application. I'm only interested in the functionality that helps me record my timesheet and so on.
I think it's the right way to think about it. And what I see many times is organizations, they're trying to find an easy button to get there. And I don't think there necessarily is when it requires you really looking at your organization and the way that you do business. I always think of businesses as a collection of processes. And so and all businesses are unique because, well, they want to have differentiators, so they make their processes their way. And I think the easy button is, hey, let me get this mega platform that'll come in and do it all for me. And therefore that I'm going to adopt the way that vendor wants me to do business. But what you're trying to do as a business is differentiate yourselves from your competitors. So you wind up customizing that platform. You've got to bring in massive consulting firms. You've got to maintain all these customizations you've made through upgrades. And I think if you just take a step back and take the approach that we've been talking about, it's like put yourself in the shoes of the end user, or actually just talk to the end user about what they care about, what the jobs are to be done, and introduce a layer that allows them to do that the organization owns, whether that's an intranet or a software like what we provide. And then that can then connect in as an abstraction to these backend tools that make it all happen. And it doesn't matter what their interfaces look like to end users, because you're not going to use them. You use this abstraction layer that's consistent, that's branded for you, that's your own, basically your own shopping mall, your own for your organization.
Cool. I love this metaphor is just like rattling around in my brain. I think it's so perfect, Cristian. And I'm curious to know how, if we think about kind of traditional BPM, or like when you're going out to build the shopping mall, historically it's always been, okay, we have to get everything right. Well, let's think about all of the processes and all the models up front. It seems like looking at those to-do lists from everybody coming through the door, it's almost impossible to assume what everybody's going to want when they come through the door. So how in 2026, like how do you build out that shopping mall in a way that actually meets people where they are versus without knowing all the answers up front?
Well, this is a very complicated question. The way I see it is that you basically have to start from somewhere. And even if you would have, let's think for a second that we're making widgets and the company stops selling widgets and starts building their digital workplace. Still not, it's not going to work because some of those people, they have their own priorities. Maybe they have an audit. Maybe they have, maybe there is somebody on leave and so on. So things can happen. So what you have to do, what I have in mind is that number one, you have to engage to transfer the right mindset to all those experienced drivers. Okay. Operational managers, project managers, internal business service providers, and leadership. And then in their own time, but somehow restricted, like not really 2 years, they have to start thinking and build their own shop. Maybe at the beginning is not so nicely done, like within a traditional, the way you would see, like going to a shopping mall. But they start doing things and they start putting some of the products, not in order of the SKU, but in categories, nice, and they display some of those things you might want to know about them. So when you interact with the shop, you see, well, I have all the news, basically all the news within the shop is in their first few meters of entering the shop, maybe 10 meters, I don't know, 5 meters, but it's within this range. So when you go in, you start seeing like 180 degrees what the shop is offering you, and not necessarily just what you want from the shop. It's slightly different. It's me looking for information versus information from the shop looking for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you work with them, and they have to have the right mindset. They have to have a time frame, and then they start building their shop. And maybe not from the first day, but within several months, they do something, and they need a feedback loop. And this is very easy to set up. It's not very complicated. So, and you move from there.
Yeah, you've got to start in one spot. I think swallowing the elephant whole is a recipe for disaster. I mean, I've seen this happen really well organically, where HR will do this and they'll get it right, and all of a sudden IT wants to jump on board, and then finance wants to jump. The different lines of business want to jump on board. But someone's got to lead the way. I think one of the biggest challenges is who's got the budget and who owns them all within an organization, and I think that's still evolving. We've definitely seen a rise of chief experience officers or transformation offices, and I guess that's kind of where this ultimately lands. But I don't think organizations are right out of the gate saying, hey, let's do this organizational wide, because it's too hard to get to that much buy-in. But I do think that leaders should be thinking about, if that's really where they want to get to, they ought to choose that, whatever that layer is that they're using, they ought to choose the one that's going to allow them to get there with the least amount of friction, because different lines of business are going to want to do things a little bit differently. Again, there has to be guardrails and controls around so you can have consistency, but they need to choose a system that's flexible and then also affordable enough to roll out organization wide. That's another big thing. A lot of times, whatever that platform is, if they want to roll it out organization wide, it's way too expensive, the per user licensing, et cetera.
Yeah, you have to have this in mind from day one, because eventually you want to reach everybody within the organization. Even if you have frontline workers like warehouse workers, you need to be able to reach them as well. So eventually, and you have to be able to factor in
Sure.
all costs, because otherwise it can be expensive. And I mean, it's going to be expensive anyway, but it's you have to have a good ROI all the time, and it's this is one of
It's a many times I find it's a hard. There's definitely ways to measure the ROI, but have organizations have they actually looked at the loss of employees' time in doing these processes and how much it's actually costing them? Because once you look at that, it's pretty easy to see a massive ROI. Like if we can reduce user time loss by 30%, that means, I mean, you can multiply out the labor dollars or the cost savings and efficiency gains there. But many times organizations haven't done that study. It's like a guess, or they just intuitively know that something is wrong and they want to improve it. I think it's really kind of important to get that, and then also have a system that's measuring those metrics. What I always look for is whatever that service is. So we'll use you back to the shopping mall analogy. If we're selling jeans, we want to see the quantity of jeans being purchased go up. So the number of requests to HR potentially going up, but then the average fulfillment time, the turnaround time to get that service going down. And I think those are the two metrics that we want to manage. And I guess back to like, how do you prioritize or get after this in an organization? My go-to is what's happening in the most volume within, let's just say it's HR, and leave requests happen in the most volume and they take the longest to get approved and fulfilled. I always start with the ones that happen in the most volume, and then the secondary one is take the longest. I usually don't start with what's the most complicated process in my organization. That happens twice a year. It's like, let's hold off on that. Let's get some quick wins, because again, if they're the ones that happen the most frequently and take the longest, that's where you're going to get your biggest efficiency gains.
Yeah, that's a very good. What I'm also saying that you also need to look at the availability of the resources.
Sure.
If people they're busy doing something else, you don't want to wait for them. I mean, maybe you have volunteers, and from those volunteers, you pick projects that are suitable for you, and you go from there. And you want to have like a distributed way of implementing, because otherwise, if you do it process by process, is very time consuming. You need to show some quick results in 6 months, 1 year, maybe.
Love it. Maybe kind of a wrap up question for today could be, if we're having this conversation next year, so 2027, do you both think we're still having the same conversation, or will technology, AI changes in this next year make for a slightly different conversation? Is this going to be an age-old problem that businesses are always going to endure, or is there going to be something different that we'll want to be talking about, or a different way to approach, or a new technology that might come in and disrupt how the employee experience looks across a large organization? James, I'll throw it over to you first.
Yeah, I mean, my initial thoughts are this is a people and a mindset change problem, and so I think, you know, I talk to more and more people that this stuff is top of mind to them, and so organizations are starting to really think about this. I think the conversation changes next year as people adopt that mindset and start to, I'll say, you know, implement that mindset within their organizations. The conversations might be on more on lessons learned and best practices, and potentially technology enablers that help them get there. But I really do think it's a mindset shift. And, you know, I'm hopeful that this year is a year of just evangelism of this message, so that leaders can be selecting tools and technologies that will enable them to get to the shopping mall experience across their organization. But now they might not take it across their organization in 1 year. They might start in just, you know, 1 or 2 lines of business. But if they've got the knowledge that this is a meaningful and worthwhile endeavor to go down, which I firmly believe it is, then they need to understand that they're going to eventually want to roll it out across their organization. So picking the right foundation is important.
Well, from my side, I look at AI like a very good tool. Actually, I love it. There are some restrictions, so it's also AI. It's a better way to do stuff that you do within the company, but it's not solving all the problems. So, and the problems when it comes to employee experience, digital employee experience, is going a lot deeper. Notice, and this is actually my theme for this year. Many organizations think in terms of processes, and actually, I'm a trained process redesign person. I can really strong in this area. But the problem is that when you design a process, you look at the employees, well, they have some inputs here, and there. People assume that those human resources are going to do their job. And actually, it's not. So you look at the process and you see, well, it's failing, and you don't understand why. And you blame the tools, you blame the procedures, you blame the people. And the problem that you have is that there is too much focus on the process itself and too little process that focus on the employee. If you want to be focused on the employee doing the work, you just need to start to think in terms of services, having him as the internal customer of a service that is being provided by somebody who probably owns the process. And for this person to say that, to think, well, how do I best serve this employee so that it's very easy for him to manage the workflow. Then when you scale it, and instead of having one internal service provider, you look at all of them, you have to start to think, well, how do I create a consistent experience across the board? So whatever we do in terms of platforms, in terms of changes, in terms of best practices that we want to introduce, so new products, whatever, how do we have how do you look at the employee as our as a customer as well? Actually, it's the most important customer because
Mhm.
don't treat them extremely well. And whatever you do is going to fail on your external customers.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that shift in focus from process to really, I call it outcomes, like your internal customers, they're looking for what's the outcome and putting more of a focus on there. I've seen plenty of over engineered processes, and we need to think about like, hey, this person just, whatever their request might be to some internal team, is it easy to make that request and can I get turned around more quickly than picking up the phone? And then I think once you start getting those processes ironed out and inside of a system, then you can start looking at them and finding the bottlenecks. Then you can introduce AI to certain steps to maybe automate those steps to make the whole thing go faster. And you can get back to the quantity of executions of processes and the velocity of processes. Once you've got them inside of some type of a common framework, then you can start to optimize. But you've got to take that first step, and your employees don't really care about the process, they care about the outcome.
Yeah, and actually they care about what do I have to do, and it's very pragmatic. It's something that I find over and over again. So I'm an employee doing a task, and there is somebody within the organization who owns the task, that process. Those roles are not really connected. So actually, you have to connect those people in a self-service way. It's not the disconnection or the lack of connection between employees drives the outcome more than anything else.
Well, I think one of the most just to put a fine point on it, one of the most important ways to connect, I think, is providing visibility to me as an employee as to where something's at. Like the worst feeling is something goes into a black box, i.e. you send an email and you don't hear back for 3 weeks. But if I can come to a consistent spot and say, oh, it's out there, you could, even if the process is working well and it's done, or if it's stuck at a step, at least I've got visibility into it. And then that actually can provide meaningful feedback like, hey, I see it got stuck at this step of the process. Is there a way to make this better? Whatever that is. I think feedback doesn't necessarily need to be a survey that was a 1 to 10. It could be,
it's
because
very
people lie.
If it's a survey 3 months down the line. And actually, because this is my favorite example with the shopping mall. The most important destination within the shopping mall would be the toilets. And if you look at the shopping mall and you don't figure out from most areas where the toilets are, then you have a design problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how do I get there? Like we should have to design those things very much like a toilet because people assume, well, we have all the digital resources and we do this and this and this and this, but when the people have to do a task, you have to be able to fix it, to do it fast.
Right.
To get feedback, like you said, well, if it's stuck, it's with this person. Maybe I give them a call, whatever, or I just wait. And I know I have seen a note while he's checking something that maybe this other person is not there for 2 days. No problem, it's fine. We all understand this. But if it's taking me longer, probably I would not even do it. So it's very much like it doesn't exist at all.
Sure.
Spend money and it's for nothing.
Yep. It's back to it. That's it. The experience leads to adoption. So
Yeah. So when you have a good experience, things come naturally. When experiences, it's very much like a communication between two people who are friends with each other.
right. Well, I know I'm just starting my day over here, but you're at the end of yours, so
Yeah.
maybe we should sign off, and love to jump back on and continue the conversation at some point.
I would love to. Thank you very much, guys, for having me. Have a
You're
great
welcome.
day.
All
Bye.
right.
This has
Okay.
been great.
See ya.
Thanks all.